I'm Spencer Cihak. You're listening to KEDT, your community-owned station. I'm joined today by Denise Villalobos, who's running for Texas State Representative in District 34. Denise, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem.
By day, chemical engineer running for state representative. What's that journey like?
Yeah, so I born and raised right here in House District 34. Went to Toloso Midway from pre-K 4 all the way through graduation, and now I have the honor of serving on their school board, so that's pretty cool. But growing up, we really didn't have much. We were well below the poverty line. My mom worked at a convenience store making less than 20 grand a year, and my father struggled with substance abuse, so just cause for an insane home environment. But public education and TM was definitely my safe haven. And with that, I was able to graduate kind of towards the top of my class. Also went to A&M Kingsville, like you mentioned, and got my chemical engineering degree. And I've been in the oil and gas industry ever since. I work at Flint Hills Resources. I'm a project manager, managing a portfolio of millions of dollars, building pipelines and terminals all across the state of Texas. And me and my husband are currently foster parents and do respite care cases throughout the year. We're hoping to adopt our foster son here before the end of the year, so we'll see how it goes.
Very exciting. And what made you want to run for state representative?
Yeah, so growing up, I really didn't watch cartoons, and that sucked. My dad controlled the TV, and he only watched the History Channel and the news. And so very early on, I had this perception that an elected official is someone who can have such a positive, large outreach on society to help enact positive change, and especially to help children who were in situations that I was in growing up. And it's something I've always wanted to do. I've been interested since 7th grade. That's kind of when it piqued my interest. I helped with a ton of different local races. Even in high school, Abel and his kids, our previous representative, went to Toloso Midway, and I went up to him as a little 4'10" high schooler, and I said, "Abel, you're voting this way and that way on these different types of bills. Like, why? And one day I'm going to be big and I'm going to run for your seat." And he would just laugh and say, "Oh, Denise," like, "Oh, Denise, this little girl." And then on top of that, I also wanted to mention this has been a passion of mine. And I went to Flint Hills, and I've been asking them for about 5 years now to run for office, and not necessarily state rep, but city council or something, because it's something I've always wanted to do. And for 5 years, may I run for office? And their answer was constantly, "No, Denise, that's a conflict of interest. No, I'm sorry, conflict of interest." And it wasn't until this 5th and final year when Abel announced his retirement, and I asked, and they said, "Well, think about it." And I was like, whoa, what? Like, okay, I've never gotten this far before. And the decision went all the way up to our CEO, Jeff Ramsey, in Wichita, Kansas. And he said, "We constantly complain that our politicians lack the integrity and the business values we hold as a company. Yet we do not allow our employees the freedom nor the opportunity to run for office. So let this be the start." I cried like a little girl and called everybody.
Certainly an exciting start. If elected, what are some policies you would champion?
Everywhere I go since I've been on the campaign trail, I have been talking specifically to our residents on what do we need to pass to help build and make HD 34 thrive. One of them, talking to the CEO of Physicians Premier, said, "Hey, our rural areas," because HD 34 is the western half of Nueces County, so it includes half of Corpus Christi, Robstown, Bishop, Banquete, Agua Dulce, and everything in between. And he said, "Our rural areas have very limited access to care. I would like to open up a shop in some of those parts so they can have easier access to care. However, as an emergency room, they would be charged astronomical rates. And so he would like to pass a bill. If you open up like emergency rooms in rural areas, you won't be charged those rural rates as you're going in for basic care." And so those are types of things that we would like to pass. Also, when I went to Agua Dulce and I spoke to their mayor, we talked about how their marshal service that they have there protecting their city, protecting their school district, they're paid by a private entity, Wyatt Ranches. That's not right. Like, they need state funding and state grants to help protect their citizens there, not having to rely on a private citizen stepping up and picking up the buck when the government has not. Another thing, as on the school board, I know funding is a hot topic issue, and it's going to be big this next legislative session. And I would love to move from weighted average daily attendance funding for our public school districts into enrollment-based funding for our public school districts. Let me tell you, at Tuloso Midway, this is the way the funding structure is currently set up for all public schools. If all your kids attend school 90% of the time, you only get 90% of the funding. That's crazy because you're operating at 100% of your budget. And so I would like to move to enrollment base. So if you get paid for every single kid the max amount, no matter if they're attending 90% or not. That would increase funding across the board for all public schools. There's a ton of different policies that we've been talking about. Another good one is talking to Valero on the appraisal values and protesting and how that affects local governments. We need legislation that says whatever the tax amount you paid last year, you should be able to pay that amount this year, and then anything above that is what goes into litigation. And so that way all of our local governments can pass their budgets and continue on with their daily operations with some money in the bank, as opposed to waiting for entire litigations on full entire amounts that the way the current system is set up.
Education certainly is going to be a hot topic for sure. The voucher system currently being debated. How do you feel about it overall?
Yeah, I'm a strong I believe in America. I believe in the free market, and I believe school choice would empower parents and give them the right to choose where their child should get their education, whether that is public school, charter school, homeschool, private school. It breeds in competition into our educational system to allow what is best for each individual child. Individualized learning is the best for every single kid, and not every kid is the same. But let me tell you, it's going to pass with or without me, school choice. And we need to have the appropriate conversations now. For when the bill is written, we have the appropriate guardrails in place in terms of accountability for all entities. Also, I would like to add, in the last legislative session, they did try to tie it with public school funding. And in my opinion, that's not okay. The last time public schools received an increase on their basic allotment was in 2019. 2019, so many things have happened since then. Think about COVID. Think about how much your grocery bill itself has increased since 2019. That was the last time public schools got an increase. And that is needed this legislative session without being tied, with no strings attached. We need a large increase to public ed funding. I do believe, and let me speak about Tuloso Midway, where I'm a part of the school board. We are an extremely competitive school district. When school choice passes, I'd expect to lose minimal to no students at all. We have a dual language program where we're teaching English students Spanish and Spanish students English, and they're cross-training each other in classrooms. By fifth grade, the majority of our students, or all of our students in those classes, will be completely bilingual. We have a excellent CTE program, which I helped pass the bond for last year, training law enforcement, nurses, welders, I&E technicians, to where they can get level 4 certificates in high school and then exit immediately into the workforce. We had a process operations technician going through Del Mar College, getting continuing education, graduated as a senior from Tuloso Midway last year. Next day, started at ExxonMobil, making 6 figures. Those are the types of stories and opportunities we need to provide all children, and school choice just allows even more of a market to do that for them.
So you're a proponent of the voucher system, but the money would come from somewhere else? Do I understand that correctly? It would not be coming from the same pot.
going towards enrollment-based funding. So let's say each child is worth $10,000. If that child is going to a public school, they should get the full $10,000, not $9,000 because he attended 90% of the time. Now, if that child chooses to go to a private school, that entity would get the $10,000. These are your taxpayer funds that you are paying through your property taxes. They should follow your child. You should not have to be paying double the rates if your child goes to a different entity. But with all that being said, I just ideally in my head, if I had my own way, my own utopian, I would completely even try to transition out of the property tax rates and the way public schools is funded, And this past legislative session, they did just that with community colleges, and it was amazing. Now they're funding community colleges based off of results and not a lot of different just noise that was in their financial equations. We need a new equation for public schools, and I would hope it would transition away from property taxes, because we're just renting our land from the government, and that sucks.
To those that are skeptical of this program, that believe that, this is public money, it should go towards something public, everybody can use it, what would your message be to them?
As a parent, as a taxpayer, you have a right to educate your child any way you see fit. Your tax dollars for your child should follow your child to provide that excellent education they need, whether that's public, private, homeschool, charter school. Whatever your child needs is where your tax dollars should follow them.
Switching topics here, Operation Lone Star, certainly something controversial between the state and the federal government. I've been asking this question in every interview so far. What do you think Texas's role should be when it comes to the border?
If the federal government is not doing its job at the border, then Texas has a right to step in and step up to protect our citizens, to protect Texans. I was recently endorsed by the border union, and the National Border Union Security Council, I believe is a full name, but I greatly appreciate that. I'm hoping to actually take a tour here of the border before Election Day, so I can speak to all the facts and everything more eloquently of what I saw during my visit of the border.
Is there anything that you would like to see done differently by the state government or the federal government?
I would say I would love if the state government did not have to step up and intervene the way it had been. I know that was extremely controversial, but the federal government does need to protect us as much as possible, and I would be 100% on board. If they're not, then making sure we as a state have the resources necessary to protect Texans here. In HD 34, let me tell you specifically, we have Highway 77. Highway 77 is a direct route from Mexico, goes straight to Houston. It is about 30 miles in HD 34. We have illegals that cross that road. We have drugs, narcotics that cross that road. My father-in-law is actually a part of the Kingsville Task Force, and every day they stop thousands of kilos of cocaine, of fentanyl that are coming along Highway 77. That's our backyard. And we need to make sure we do what we need to do at the border so that does not infiltrate our communities.
Great. One final topic, certainly something of note here in Texas so far has been women's reproductive health. I'm just curious, your opponent talked a lot about the current law in place, and he feels it's rather extreme. I'm just curious to get your opinion on it, and if you'd like to see maybe any changes to what has been another controversial bill through Texas so far.
Yeah, I am 100% pro-life. I know my opponent was endorsed by Planned Parenthood. I'm endorsed by Texas Alliance for Life. And it's more than just being pro-life. I actually do something about it in my own life. Me and my husband are foster parents. We got our foster son 2 weeks old straight from the hospital. He was born with a ton of ailments with him, one of them including drug exposure. And that was insane and having to deal with. He went through withdrawals for about 3 straight months, but we were able to get through that, and now he's an average toddler. You couldn't tell anything was wrong with him. I support causes like the Coastal Bend Pregnancy Center that are working along at-risk mothers and families to help them get the child care they need, to teach them how to be a parent that don't have those resources, that don't have the support system. They provide the support system, and even get them a job if they're needing it. Those are the types of programs I want to push. I believe the current law is great the way it is. It does have some exemptions for those extreme cases. The current law does. However, I know there are some instances in the medical field where they're wanting some additional clarifications, and that can be provided. But the way it is, it is a pro-life law with exemptions to strong things that are happening. Yeah, I don't know a better way to say it. Sorry.
Understood. No, it's certainly a very touchy topic. It's uniquely important to discuss and challenging at the same time. You do hear stories though about women being denied some emergency coverage to the point where it becomes life-threatening. Do you think that there could be some room there that you don't end up in situations where there was a story about a woman denied from the emergency room 3 times, ends up having issues in her car. It becomes a very extreme kind of situation. Do you think stuff like that, though, could be resolved?
Yeah, so more clarifications for doctors so they're not in that predicament where they're scared to do something is probably needed this legislative session. But the way the law stands today, I'm also support.
It certainly also must be tricky. You talked about earlier just some of these healthcare deserts. Being a doctor, and if I come here and next thing you know, there is I'm an emergency room doctor. There's an emergency situation. A pregnant woman ends up at the hospital. I could end up going to jail theoretically as the doctor. Do you worry at all that this will cause bigger problems in terms of healthcare access in Texas?
I don't think I fully understand the question. I'm sorry.
Well, if you're a doctor and like these situations where the woman will come in, she'll have an emergency, something wrong has happened, something very unfortunate, and the doctors have been turning certain women away just because of fear of the law then coming after them if they don't. If something happens and they're trying their best but it still goes wrong, is there any concern at all about larger implications for bringing doctors to the state and wanting to be a medical professional in Corpus Christi and Texas at large?
Yes, and that has been the feedback from the current bill is the clarifications on some specific scenarios on how to act without being in violation of the law.
Understood. Okay. Is there anything we haven't discussed that you were hoping to?
No, I'm good here.
Great.
But yeah, I'm Denise Villalobos. I'm 100% for our community, for our cops, and for our kids. I want to make sure HD 34 thrives with job creations and opportunities for our children to build successful lives right here at home.
Great. Thank you so much.
This has been a KEDT election coverage special. Tune in to the KEDT 90.3 FM Mayoral Roundtable on October 30th at 9 a.m. and follow us on social media at Your KEDT on Facebook, Instagram, and X.